That's Jimmy Stein. I'm Clint Lamb, and this is the Cover Crimson YouTube channel. Jimmy talked about Alabama's offense against Missouri's defense. Now we're flipping to the other side, talking about Alabama's defense going against Missouri's offense. Missouri's offense, man, it is really good right now. I mean, you got a quarterback who has a high completion percentage. He's thrown for a lot of yards. He's got weapons in the passing game. You got an offensive line who's doing some really good things, but you got two very, very good running backs who you can kind of lean on, and I would say they're the primary as far as that offense is concerned. What are your thoughts on Alabama's defense having to go on the road and play Missouri on Saturday?
Well, they make you defend a lot, but first of all, you got to defend the run. You got to sell your defense on this. You're not going to win the game if they rush for 300 yards. You're just not. You're just not. Limiting Missouri is different than limiting others. I would say keeping Missouri under 200 yards is limiting Missouri. Keeping them under 200 gives you a good chance to win the football game. It's just a different type of attack. People, I know, to give an example, a lot of Alabama fans are like dismayed at Justice Haynes in terms of his productivity at Michigan. Different system, just a radically different system. They're doing something radically different with the running back position than Alabama does. And they sort of build it around running back, and that's how they do it. That's how Missouri does it. I mean, they build it around that spot, and they feature it, and they go to it, and they're committed to it, and it helps that you have a talent like Ahmad Hardy and even Jamal Roberts behind him. This is where the matchup is, and I'm very interested in hearing how he proposes that Alabama deals with it. I like the idea of Clint's guy, Justin Jefferson, maybe seeing him at Husky again, maybe seeing him on the field a lot in that Husky or outside type position in the slot, allowing both Deontay Lawson and Nikhai Hill-Green, Alabama's best run-stopping linebackers, all on the field at the same time. Makes a lot of sense to me. Maybe getting bigger up front. What I call, I'm sure Kane doesn't call it this, but what I call a two-bandit look, which means two of those bandits on the field at the same time. LT Overton on one side, Jordan Renaud on the other. That gets you bigger up front. I can see Alabama doing all of those things because priority number one, you ain't going to stop it. You ain't going to shut it out, but slow down that Missouri run game. Don't let them dominate the game from a time of possession standpoint or from a point scored standpoint because they're having success in the run game that Alabama has no answer for.
Yeah, the number one thing, I mean, it's an outside zone scheme primarily. Does not mean Ahmad Hardy, just his ability to break tackles. I mean, he's going to bang between the tackles, and he's going to do a good job doing it. So I don't want anybody to get confused that this is a slasher off tackle type of rushing attack that is, hey, Tim Keenan's going to be able to take the day off because they're not going to do a whole lot, in the A gaps. It's like they're going to do it all. It's just primarily a lot of their success is outside zone, getting things to the perimeter. You've got to make tackles. And that's something that Alabama has struggled with at times. I think they did a good job of it in the second half against Vanderbilt. They need to continue that. Hopefully they built some confidence. They figured some things out. I do think Justin Jefferson, that is a potential solution. Now, granted, that's going to be dependent upon what Missouri does from an offensive personnel standpoint. And I will be curious to see what they end up doing as far as that is concerned. But what's interesting is like a place like Missouri, and I'm not trying to disrespect them at all, but when you lose a first-round pick, a first-round tackle in Mimbo, and then you lose Luther Burden, who was probably, a borderline first-round talent, fell to the second round, a lot of teams wouldn't be able to replace that production. I think what they have as far as Kevin Coleman is concerned at wide receiver, I think he is better for that offense than Luther Burden was because, I don't think that there's this force, like we're going to force it to Kevin Coleman like they were trying to do at times, especially when they were so depleted last year on the offensive side. And, so I think he's actually a better fit for where they're at currently with their offense. But then Keegan Trost is a Wake Forest transfer who's starting at right tackle for them, took over for Mimbo, and he is playing really good football, especially from a pass protection standpoint. So their ability to get impact players from the transfer portal, give them a lot of credit because it's been on both sides of the football. Pribula has been really good being a transfer player, a veteran player. And so Alabama, it's not just a matter, you've got to primarily stop or limit Ahmad Hardy and Jamal Roberts. That has to be where everything starts. Even if, and I would say trying to keep him, the quarterback in the pocket, I think that is also something that would try to limit his ability to escape, extend, make plays with his legs, do all that stuff. But where it has to start is that rushing attack for Missouri, because that is where they build their entire offensive identity, and pretty much everything that they do is based off of that as a complementary piece.
Yep. And, they've had throughout Drink's career, they've had some real big time production for the running back spot, but no one's been as good as Hardy. I'm starting to, I want to see more before I get emphatic about this, but I think Ashton Genty is a decent comp here. Not so much skill for skill, pound for pound, but in terms of how much better he is than everyone. This kid has like doubled up everyone else in the SEC in terms of production. He's the leading rusher in the entire country and has had a bye. So, I mean, there was 1 week he didn't even play, and he's still leading the nation in total yards rushing. I mean, and a sophomore. I mean, the SEC's got to deal with this kid again next year. He's a heck of a talent from the Sun Belt. Seems like all these guys are from somewhere else. Pribula's from Penn State. Kevin Coleman has played in 4 places. I think he was at Mississippi State last year. Before that, he was at Louisville. Before that, he was at Jackson State in the SWAC. But he was a, high 4-star level type player, the right tackle from Wake Forest. The left tackle is probably one of the very best players on their team. He's going to be questionable going into the game. I think whether he plays or not is one of the factors. But Drink done an incredible job of melding all these guys into a team. They all came from somewhere else. One difference between Vanderbilt and Missouri to bring up, though, Clint, that I find that's going to be very difficult for Alabama's defense here is if you could limit Vanderbilt's run to where they weren't able to really move the sticks with the run game alone and get ahead of Vanderbilt and force Pavia into the pocket, making plays with his arm from the pocket, I'll be honest, Vanderbilt's dead at that point. I'm not saying Pavia sucks, but Pavia's not a pocket passer. That's just not who he is. That's not what they want to do. But you can sort of force them into that. If you limit the run and get ahead, and I think we saw in the fourth quarter, particularly late, what Vanderbilt's offense looked like in that scenario when they couldn't run the ball and all they could really do is Pavia's just going to throw it from the pocket. They had no chance. I mean, every pass play was an opportunity for an Alabama defensive back to get a pick. Well, Missouri's not that way. I mean, if you limit their ability to run the ball and they have to throw it from the pocket, Pribula will hurt you. He is a good passer. Is he awesome? Is he a first round pick? I'm not saying any of those things. That's not true. He's good. He's better than Pavia in that scenario, in that circumstance. You're ahead of Missouri by 2 scores. All they can really do now is throw the ball to catch up. He can do it. And he's got wide receivers. Kevin Coleman is an NFL football player. He's going to be a good player even at the next level. So Vanderbilt, if you force him into being one-dimensional, you really had to like where you were. I just don't see Missouri as one-dimensional. Yes, they run the ball better than they throw it. Yes, it's one of the best rushing attacks. But if you take that away somehow, some way, they still have weapons to hurt you. And the tight end, Norfleet, pretty good player too.
Yeah, he absolutely is a pretty good player. And I think you bring up a great point. Caden Green, their left tackle, that's a very important factor. A right foot injury forced him out, forced him to miss the South Carolina game and then the UMass game. And I think his backup, Javen Richardson, he struggled in pass protection. I know against South Carolina, I mean, he wasn't terrible, but he also wasn't great. He gave up a couple of pressures. But against UMass, I mean, he gave up 4 pressures and 2 sacks. So he really, really struggled. And when you talk about Jan Zapier and LT Overton and some of those guys that Alabama's going to have out there on the edge, if you can keep Missouri off schedule as much as you can limit, not stop. I think it's foolish to have the expectation that, hey, we're going to stop this run game. This isn't going to be Leonard Fournette, back in 2015, where just Alabama's defense, he was one of the best rushing offenses, one of the best running backs, and they just completely shut him down. That's great when you get it. And maybe they do that on Saturday. that being the expectation is foolish. It is slowing down, not stopping, going in should be the expectation. Figuring out ways to slow them down, create second and long situations, create third and medium to third and long situations as often as possible. Because if you can keep them in those situations where a guy like Hardy or Roberts don't get the number of carries that they probably, I'm not saying there's a specific target, but I would say that it's like, hey, our success, if we can get him 20 plus carries, 25 plus carries in this football game, then that probably bodes well for us because it means we're staying on schedule enough where we can continue to feed him the football. And that's where this offense is at its best. With Javen Richardson, their left tackle, if he ends up being their starter, and even if Caden Green ends up playing, will he be 100%? Will he be a liability at left tackle trying to play through some things? Alabama needs to try to exploit that as much as possible, regardless of which guy it is. They got the dudes who can exploit that, but you've got to, and understand that a lot of this stuff is outside zone where that tackle is going to be important from a run blocking standpoint, but it's more so in those situations where you can get Missouri into some uncomfortable down and distances and then being able to tee off on that. I think that is absolutely critical to their success.
Yeah, and Justin Jefferson had such a big game against Vanderbilt, and I think in part because that game was just his game. I know they kind of moved. I thought it was interesting. They play him at Husky really for the first time, do something different in terms of trying to match up with Vanderbilt. The result is SEC Defensive Player of the Week. You have to wonder why change that. This week. I mean, to me, I know Missouri's run attack, Clint's described it well. It's different than Vanderbilt's. It's not the same. They both emphasize the run. They do it two different ways. But I do think that Justin Jefferson, Nakia Hill-Green, and Deontay Lawson all on the field at the same time, now that they're more comfortable with it, it makes a lot of sense to me. But those guys at the same time, you're all out there to defend the run. You're also going to have to make plays in coverage. They do have the tight end who's a weapon. And they're not shy about throwing the ball. Here's what they don't do, which is pretty interesting. How about this? Ahmad Hardy has like one catch, maybe two. They don't throw it to him very much. Jamal Roberts has 6 catches, I think. So they throw it to him about once a game, but they don't spend a lot of time throwing to the backs, which is interesting. I wonder if it's a can't catch versus we don't really do that. Also, text tells me they don't have a check down in an NFL sense. That's really more of an NFL thing than a college thing anyway, for a lot of y'all that don't know that, checking it down to the running back. That's something you see every Sunday, everywhere, a little less common in college football. In college football, they keep that running back in to block more than they just immediately send him out to be a safety valve. But regardless, I just say that to say Missouri doesn't really throw to the backs very much. All the more reason to have Deontay Lawson, Nakia Hill-Green, and Justin Jefferson on the field, because I think they're a little bit better against the run than they are in coverage. So that's the interesting thing to me, Clint. X's and O's. What does Womack do on defense to attack Missouri? And knowing that Womack has been multiple this year. Last year, there was no question what Alabama was going to do. They only kind of played one defense all year, and I know it's more complicated than that, but they generally only played with 3 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, and 5 DBs on virtually every snap all last year. This year, they've been a lot more multiple, trying to win matchups. And to me, maybe there's some carryover from Vanderbilt to Missouri. Missouri does it differently. That doesn't mean the personnel packages have to be differently. So I'm still looking at that as something I'm very interested in. And lastly, I'll say this. Hardy and Roberts are good. They're going to bust through that front 6, that front 7 a lot. The DBs have to have a good tackling game, or Missouri's in the end zone. I mean, the DBs have got to get Hardy and Roberts to the ground, or they're in the end zone. And Alabama's DBs have had their issues with tackling. You can't have that again, not against this group.
Yeah, there's no way you can put Alabama's defense, especially their corners in particular. You need to try to avoid putting them in those isolated situations against Ahmad Hardy. It's not going to end well for them. I don't care if it's Xavier Brown. I don't care if it's Damani Jackson. I mean, to be honest with you, it's not good for Dijon Lee. It's really not. And I will be curious, like Kevin Coleman, the fact that he's such a dynamic slot player, a lot. I want to say he only has 8 targets beyond 10 yards so far this season. So it's, behind the line of scrimmage, it's anywhere up to 10 yards. It's more of the short underneath stuff where he's being utilized. And, that's something that I'll be curious to see what that ends up looking like from a coverage standpoint. Like if you do have Justin Jefferson on the field, he's playing that de facto star or Husky. I still confuse the two, pretty much same thing anyways. Then, what does that look like from a coverage standpoint? A lot of zone, I'm sure. But, just making sure that you're like, one thing about it, as good as Justin Jefferson played last week, I want to say he was targeted 10 times. He gave up 8 catches. Like from a coverage standpoint, from a number standpoint, it doesn't look great. Granted, a lot of it was, he wasn't giving up a ton after the catch, but just a lot of soft spots in the zone where he was asked to kind of get out there and make tackles. That actually contributed some to him having 14 tackles. But at the same time, Kevin Coleman being that dynamic player, like that's something that with Zachariah Branch, Georgia kind of had it. I probably need to go back and watch how they were playing him. Probably need to more so look at that game, at least to an extent, compared to Vanderbilt, because Vanderbilt didn't have that dynamic, after the catch playmaker like a Kevin Coleman or a Zachariah Branch. But at the same time, based off of what Missouri does, there are going to be plenty of opportunities as far as getting all three of those guys onto the field, in my opinion. And I think that they're playing very confident. This is another one of those Vanderbilt, Florida State to an extent, even though they do it differently as far as East-West and trying to strain you that way. You saw it, how it looks when they're not confident against Florida State. You saw how it can look when they are confident against Vanderbilt. Which of those two do you get against Missouri? I think that will end up playing a massive part in how things play out.
That's a great point about, Justin Jefferson giving up those pass receptions. I could be significantly worse, or in terms of giving up the big play against Missouri, who's just a little more gifted. That's why you have to change it up. It's why Womack does change things this year. Being more complex makes you more difficult to prepare for. Again, I like all three inside linebackers on the field at the same time, but you can't do it for all 60 snaps or 70 snaps, however many are out there. You got to change it up. You've got to show them things they don't necessarily expect. And Alabama's not shy about playing a lot of players. I'm sure that's not going to change. But at the same time, you do have to change up the packages and change up the personnel, but in particular, changing up those packages. Getting pressure on Prbula is going to be big in this game. One tackles Gimpy. Already talked about that. That's going to be some opportunities. And again, I want to stress, like what I did early in the show. Yes, Missouri's offensive personnel is a little scary, and Alabama fans should have some level of anxiety about it. But they didn't just line up and motor over South Carolina and Kansas and score 50 and score 60 and never punt the ball. I mean, they're not that. They're just capable of a lot. And like most every team in the SEC, they have dudes. And sometimes, hey, when it's your dude versus their dude's going to win sometimes too. I mean, that's just the nature of the sport. When you don't have a decided talent level advantage in every spot. You got to remember, football is a team game. It's also 11 one-on-one matchups at times. And when you're playing a team that's got some dudes, they're going to win some of those one-on-ones at times. You just have to limit their wins, and hopefully they don't come at bad times in the game. But I like this role that Alabama ended the Missouri game on defensively, those last 3 quarters. I think whether Alabama wins the game or not this weekend has a lot to do with the carryover from those last 3 quarters defensively, as it relates to physically tackling. A lot of the things that helped you win the Vandy game on defense will help you this weekend against Missouri.
Yeah, and I do want to point out, because a lot of people, they think outside zone, and that just means attacking perimeter, and it's all dependent upon your perimeter guys. Outside zone is just, there's a lot of cutback lanes. There's a lot, it's giving the running back an opportunity to find where he wants to run the football, and that's why some of it is just Ahmad Hardy
friendly. It's running back friendly,
very much so. If you've got good vision and you can see where those opportunities and those holes are opening up, that's the kind of scheme that you want to be playing in, because it's just going to give you a lot of different options. And that's why Alabama's defense has to be gap sound. They have to make sure those cutback lanes and everything else, you can't be having 2 players in the same gap consistently and things like that, because Ahmad Hardy will find those creases and those opportunities better than any running back by a wide margin that Alabama has played up to this point. So that is something to keep in mind. Definitely want to see them have some success. I do worry. I think this would be a good game for Quay Russaw to be available in.
Yeah.
Love how Janze Pierre is playing. I really do. Can he play with this physical downhill? Not downhill, but just very physical, likes to get after you, big, powerful backs. Can he play all but one snap on defense? That's a big question mark, in my opinion. But, at the same time, Quay Russaw isn't available, and that's just part of it. Like Missouri's potentially dealing with their left tackle being out. You got to deal with injuries, and Alabama give Pierre a lot of credit because they've needed him to step up, and in my opinion, he absolutely has. But I do think that this is the type of game. Do you rely on Justin Hill, in those situations? I think more so you might see some, like you said, two bandit looks, Jordan Renaud and LT Overton on the field together. Maybe there's some Keon Keeley mixed in there, but I mean, at this point, we just haven't seen anything that would make me think that. Jimmy, do you have anything else before we hop out of here, brother?
I think it's going to be tight. I think it's going to be 60 minutes. I think games like this shape a team's season for Alabama. You lose this one, and now your back's really up against the wall with 5 really tough SEC games left. But at the same time, this game would be difficult to win. And the last thing I'd say for those that sort of laugh off this game, and I know very few of you are, if Georgia, who I think we all respect, if Georgia was playing at Missouri this weekend, what would I be saying to Georgia fans? Watch out. Watch out. There's no reason to think that Alabama, just because they beat Georgia by 3 points in Athens, is any better situated roster-wise than they are. And if Georgia would be on upset alert here, Alabama certainly is. So it's going to be a 60-minute game, but I do think Alabama gets it done. I like Alabama winning maybe somewhere around 30-27.
Yeah, I think Alabama will have to get up in the 30s. I think low to mid 30s, anywhere from 30 to 35. I think Missouri, 27, 28. I think you're very close on that number. So, yes, I still like Alabama's chances as well. We appreciate everybody who is tuning in or has tuned in. I feel like this has been a good conversation. And I do want to say, never owned a Rowback hoodie, but this thing is absolutely phenomenal. By far the best thing from a comfort standpoint that I've ever had. I'm wearing it and it's still hot outside, but I love it that much. So I've been trying to put it off, man. I really have, because it's like, it's got to make sense outside. I can't wear this anywhere, but then I put it on today. I'm like, I'm going to make my house ice cold where I can justify it. So I'm quite comfortable right now, and it feels absolutely amazing. Get over to rowback.com. Use the promo code COVER20 to get 20% off your order. We appreciate them, and we appreciate you guys, and we will talk to you guys soon.